In a wide-ranging speech, Donald Trump outlining his plan to not contain but defeat the Islamic State. Trump also blasting President Obama's handling of foreign affairs. He also tied former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to those policies, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Egypt, not just Syria. Trump ticked through what he called failures that have led to the rise of the Islamic State, and the billionaire businessman also called the policies of regime change and nation building absolute failures, stating that his effort will include putting together a coalition of moderate Arab nations, cyber warfare, and killing the ISIS social media efforts to recruit. He also called for the refusal of Muslims immigrating to the U.S., specifically from countries that are proven havens of terrorism. Joining me now in a Fox Business exclusive, former Assistant Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan, President Nixon, Presidents Bush, Hillary Clinton, former Goldman Sachs International Vice Chairman Bob Hormats. Let's get right to it. What do you see as achievable in this speech, and what do you see as absolutely impossible?
Well, there was a lot of tough talk. The question is, how do you implement a lot of the policies that he is suggesting? He talks about divisions in America and healing those divisions at the very end. He has been very divisive. One of the things you need, and he pointed this out, but his policies and his rhetoric work in the opposite direction. You need the support of moderate Muslims to deal with ISIS.
Yes, he specifically said that.
He said that
anybody who is a moderate Arab nation or moderate Muslim, you will be a partner with the U.S.
So previously, he has made the point of banning Muslims from entry in the U.S.
Which he has walked back in a certain regard.
Walked back, but you really never know where he stands. Then he says he wants to have a test for people who come in. They have to fill out some form.
An ideological questionnaire.
An ideological questionnaire about their religion, about their religious views, about a whole variety of things. He fails to realize the fact that ISIS has thrived on disaffected Sunni Muslims. Sunni Muslims from around the world, particularly Iraq and Syria. So what has he done? Most of the things he's said over the last several months have served to disaffect all Muslims. These are the countries he wants to work with. If he wants to work with them, it's very much inconsistent with what he said in the past. The second question is Iran. Iran is a country that actually is, at least in Iraq, fighting ISIS. But he wants to tear up the agreement that we made with Iran. So on one hand, he talks about working with Muslims. On the other hand, he said so many things that have alienated so many Muslims, moderate Muslims among others. It's going to be very hard for him to convince people that that is a credible policy on his part.
So what you have, though, is when he discusses certain aspects of very radical Islam, but not so entirely radical Islam, and that is where there is a misogynistic undercurrent, where they do not believe that women are equal, which we hope certainly in this country Americans do, and they resort to things he brought up, honor killings. He brought up things like, you know, how women are treated so unbelievably badly that, you know, these people should not be allowed in this country. Would they, I'm hearing you say that they might simply game the questionnaire and say, well, of course I believe women and gays have rights here, and then they would just do that to gain access to this country.
I'm all for standing up for our values in the Middle East and elsewhere. We have to. That's what we're about. Poor treatment of women, poor treatment of minorities, persecution of women, honor killings, teaching jihadi lessons in madrasas in various parts of the world. These are all things, of course, we need to stand up to. The question that he is going to have to address is, if he has these tests that people have to take for getting into the United States, what leads him to believe those people are going to honestly answer the questions that he's posed to them? And then if you try to do it country by country, there are some countries with very radical people, very strong jihadis, and then there are many human rights advocates in those countries that want to come here. So sorting these people out is going to be very difficult to do. We should be very tough if people threaten the United States.
Okay, he talks about forming coalitions with Arab nations, making them have a stake in fighting ISIS. Which nations are we talking about? Jordan, Saudi Arabia,
Well, those would be the first. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. There are a number of countries that are already in the process of fighting ISIS.
Yeah, but they're not doing enough, Bob,
Well,
and maybe that's what he's saying.
Well,
maybe he's saying they have to have a bigger stake, whether it's financial or whether they have to. Look, we sell AWACS to, these planes to Saudi Arabia. Why aren't they using those in the fight against ISIS over Syria?
Well, I do think it's important, and I think this administration has tried to develop a stronger coalition, including the Sunni Arabs, the Arabs on the western side of the Gulf in particular. But how do you do this? You really have to put them into the process and encourage them and have them do more. I think they ought to be doing more. I think that's true.
What about the oil?
But the alienation that he has perpetrated as a result of what he said is hardly the kind of rhetoric that's going to encourage them to work with him.
Maybe tough to overcome, but let's talk about his idea about oil. He had said, I was saying all along we should have, I believe he said, kept the oil. Well, he's talking about the oil fields in Iraq that we worked to liberate. And he said, and then use that oil to pay for the families here in the U.S. who had lost soldiers. That, of course, certainly, hits at the heart of what a lot of Americans feel were lost lives for very little reason. And that certainly would be popular. Is that feasible?
Well, I think I have enormous sympathy for the people who lost their lives, the families of those people. We lost a lot of people in the Iraq War. The question is, can you use the oil? How is he going to get a hold of the oil? He doesn't want to put American troops on the ground, yet if his notion is that we take the oil
he did
and
say
we hold
put troops to protect it there, so
well,
that
then we have that. There are a lot of oil fields, and those people are going to have to be there throughout Iraq. These fields are not located all in one place. They're throughout the country.
Can you commandeer another nation's natural resources?
Then you commandeer them. And do you think the Iraqis are going to sit there? You want to develop an alliance with the Iraqi government to fight ISIS. The Iraqi government is going to have to be a key player in fighting ISIS. Do you encourage the Iraqi government to work with us to fight ISIS if you have American troops on the ground holding their oil and taking the oil revenue from them?
Yeah.
These are there are a number of things he says that sound good. When you look at them and you dig deep about what he said, the kind of things he said, the kind of policies advocated, then it makes it awfully difficult for him to do the kind of things he wants. There's enormous inconsistencies when you relate what he's saying now to what he said in the past, and we don't know what his views are at any particular moment, but there are lots of inconsistencies that he still has to straighten out to
Bob
have
Hormats.
a policy. This is words. Words are not policy.
You have worked in the Secretary of State Department for many, many presidents, including Reagan, Nixon, the Bushes, Hillary Clinton, and we appreciate your perspective.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Liz.
Bob Hormats in a Fox Business exclusive.